Okay, what I want to cover here, little painting tip. This is an old wing. It's styrofoam. I was going to show you a way to do the checkers, or anything for that matter. This stuff here, it's called frisket. And this method works good for built-up surfaces. I wouldn't want to use it on an I-beam or fragile tissue covered airplanes. So this frisket material, you get it at an art supply store. You can get it online. It's pretty common. It's comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets, or this is a roll of it. Okay, let me see here. So this is what it is. I'm not sure of the stock number, if that's still accurate or not, but this is a roll I probably bought back in the 90s. And this is a little project for the grandkids. So this was all done with frisket. So the frisket was applied to this rocket, and all these checks were cut while it was in place. So what I wanted to cover here, a way to actually cut the masking while it's on the plane. Now obviously, like I said before, you don't want to do this when it's tissue paper or I-beam. If you have the right touch, you might be able to get away with it, but I've done it before. But it's better suited for a built-up surface. It's got wood underneath it. First thing you want to do, get a new blade. This is C-temp material here. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's used to be sold at Toledo a long time ago. And they sold it in sheets. It's almost like frisket, except it's just thicker. Let me see if I can find a piece of it. The way this works, let's just say you lay this on your plan, and I use it a lot for layout. And let's say the rib is drawn underneath. Let's just say this is your plan, and you want to copy this line so you can actually see through this stuff, and you just follow the line. And I didn't press very hard, but let's see how it cracks, and then you can sand it. So let's say you're going to do some masking of an airplane and you wanted some design, you can use this as a template material. So let's just say I'm going to cut some checks here with this template. I'm not going to press real hard. I'm going to press hard enough to score the frisket. So this airplane I've been flying, it's 25 years old. It's got the checks on it. That's how I did it with this method here. I made up a template to get the checks on the wing by doing this. I'm not going to go through a big old deal here, but I just wanted to show you how it's going to work. Now obviously, if you're doing this on an airplane that really mattered, you'd do the layout. You'd mark where you wanted each one of these checks on the frisket. to speed up the process, I'm just going to freehand these checks with a template. Okay, that'll be enough to show you. So now you're going to determine which checks you want to paint. So you take your X-Acto and you go in the corner and you peel the check out. And be careful when you're pulling it up. Make sure that you don't pull the one next to it up. And this could be done with a template with anything. I mean, you could do all kinds of designs. Now, obviously, if you had a computer and a bunch of software, you could sit there forever with the computer, get your mask. Once you got your mask, then you'd have to plot it out in a printer, and those aren't cheap. Or if you're artistic enough, I mean, you can just do this by hand. Or if you're not artistic, and I'm really not, is just make a template as a guide. As you see, these little pieces pull right out. So that's your mask. Let me get a can of spray paint. Now, I'm not sure, this is an old wing. I'm not sure the compatibility I'm going to get. But I'm going to get a can of quick dry lacquer here. This is what I'm going to spray it with. The only reason I'm using this is I'm pretty sure it's compatible. Not only that, it's what I have. Let me cover some of this up here. So obviously you could do it a little bit more thorough. You know, there's light spots here that I didn't quite get, which is no big deal because that's good enough for a demo here. All right, get this stuff off my fingers so it doesn't look like I got nail polish here. Now what I like to do, you'll see the frisket sort of move a little bit, you know, with the solvents. I like to peel this mask off before it really dries. I mean, it's dry, but I mean before it really cures. And as you can see here from the outlying areas, it's still wet, but now a lot of you have probably seen this airplane. This is all done the same method. Those checkers. The WM, that was done with the frisket, and the lettering was done with the frisket. And I think I made 2 masks with the letterings because I put a shadow in it. So this was done with the same method. And what I did to cut these checks, I made this is a little template, so I used this to actually score it as a straight edge, and I rotated it. And once I got the vertical scores done, and then I just took some of this C-temp and I wrapped it like this with tape, and then I ran the razor around that. So this stream is off of a phone. Hopefully it's in the camera here, or in the shot. Now it's starting to tack up a little bit. Over here where it's thick, it's wet. Out here at the outline areas, it's dry. So we'll give this another minute or so. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the tools. I'm going to go over some of the tools I've got in my workbench here. Some of the things I use quite often. Now this paint stuff, this copper, it almost looks like what Bob Hunt uses. It's real pretty copper, and I think it's a lacquer based. Now I gotta take some of the masking gum out of there. But that's what this is. You can get this stuff at any hardware store. Bright coat metallic finish. It goes on like lacquer. It goes over lacquer. Now fuel proof, I don't know. That's another story. But if you're doing electric or something, and this Tamiya stuff, I don't think that's fuel proof either. Now you'd have to experiment and see if you could put dope over it. That'll work, but you know, anytime you do this, you got to experiment. Well, let's peel this mask off and I'll show you hopefully how quick and easy the checks were. It's the same thing here. You just pick out the ones that you sprayed over. So relatively quick. Make up any type of template you want, any shape. And that's how this was done. This was a casualty here, 1992. That was going to be my Nats airplane. And this one didn't have the checkers on it. This is automotive lacquer. So subsequently, I built another one that does have the checkers, and that's how I did it. Now, this method, I don't know, you can sort of see here a little bit, and it really came out light. This airplane was, I think, only 61 ounces. But It was hobby epoxy, sort of like what Bob Hunt would do with the finishing resin. I can't remember now, but anyway, you wipe it on the wood. Obviously, it's been 1992. My memory can't remember everything. So anyway, once I got the epoxy on, I thinned out with isopropyl alcohol some of it, and I put fiberglass is 0.75 of an ounce, and it's super thin. I drape that on there, and then I put auto primer on it, and from there it was the lacquer. Now if you look, you can sort of see the light shining. You can see the fiberglass weave in this, and usually what you have to do once it cures and you wet sand it again, but that fiberglass will show through, so you're not going to get a perfect glass finish. But it was sort of an experiment. This stuff down here, this was a rub off Letraset, so it's the stuff you just sort of rub and you transfer it, and I sprayed clear over that. This line is the drafting pen line here, Letraset. And this right here is the frisket. So that's the main thing I wanted to cover. Also, some of the paints that I was buying at the hardware store, you can buy lacquer and you get two choices, white or black. And it'll say lacquer on the can. And that's what the white is here. This is a lacquer paint on this rocket for the kids. So this workbench, this is about what it looks like normally. If I get into a big mess here, a lot of experimentation or something, it looks like this. So I'm doing stain samples. Here's some stuff I'm going to do, some veneer, oak veneer. So there's a lot of stuff going here. Now over here, I wanted to go over some of the tools that I use a lot. In this, everything in this box is pretty much for model airplanes. This is a Jim Lee nose ring sander. Your engine shaft goes through here, and this sands the front of your airplane, and it lines it all up with the thrust washer. Thrust washer goes here, so that's how you can sand a perfect spinner to airplane fit. Jim Lee sells these as other tools too. Address tape measure. This tape measure, it's flexible. It's good for going around curves. Allen wrenches. Some little Z benders here. Don't use those that much. RC stuff. This is nice. I think this was only like, I don't know, 25 bucks or something, 29. It's a cheap one. It's a sort of a throwaway, but it's sort of neat because it's got millimeters, it's got thousandths of an inch, and then it also has fractions, so that comes in handy if you want to check the thickness of your balsa or whatever. So I use that a lot. This is a tool here that I couldn't build without, and it's not high quality. I mean, Starrett, if you buy a Starrett version of this, it's probably 120 bucks, this size, 150. But as long as you double check it, make sure it's square. This is an old micrometer. Comes in handy every once in a while. Don't use it that much since I got the other one. This is a Jim Lee item here. This goes in the prop hole in the center. and it rotates. That's how you get each blade equal length. Very unique tool. It's worth it. Glass cutter, drill bit set, little tack hammer. This comes in handy. Let's see, this is a, I use this when I make pens on the lathe. Sort of lines up the tubes. Let's see, this is a nice little depth gauge. It's got a inch and metric, and then on the back it's got a conversion chart. It's made in Japan. It's real high quality, and that's worth the money. This comes in handy when I set up my sanding block. Transfer a dimension from your plans to your sander. These are handy, just small. You set your angle. Comes out. The reason why I like this other one though is because it lays flat on the table. This will lay flat. Another depth gauge. I think I inherited this out of Dad's toolbox. And these things, excellent. These are pole saws. This is a sharpener, and it's ceramic sticks. I'd use this a lot when I sharpen X-Acto knives. And the angle's sort of set up on it already. You just take your knife and you hold it vertical and you run it down the ceramic sticks. Since then, I bought this thing at Menards. Sort of does the same thing. It's got a fine and a coarse. So when you get an X-Acto and you just need a little bit more out of it and it's not too far gone, this works great. As I say, shop and easy. So none of this is sponsored, of course. This is a little soldering tool. I got this at a train show. A guy had a lot of tools. So if you have a wire you need to solder, it's sort of neat because then it's got its own stand to hold it up. This is a laminate trimmer. This is more for carpentry, for edge banding. The old trusty squares. If you have this Starrett square, you probably don't need these, but I got those anyway. This is a balsa stripper. It's pretty heavy duty. It's a lot bigger than the smaller one, the master air screw. I don't even know who makes this thing. I don't even know if they make it anymore, but I use that every once in a while. Let's see what we got here. This is a little tool I made for my little stab jig for the rubber bands. Here's some diamond stones, sharpening. This is a magic marker that actually goes down into a hole. So if you have to mark a hole, this may be a 1/2 inch deep, this extension here will get down in there, and that comes in handy. And that's made by FastCap. This is Kaizen foam, and what I did, I just ran this foam through a table saw and just moved the fence over. And once I got all these little grooves cut, then I just took the Dremel, poked it down in the hole. It'll cut its own hole. You don't have to drill holes. And the old T-pins, believe it or not, I still use those things. This is a little trimmer for Monaco. I got this at Toledo. Put a straight edge razor in it, and you run this over the surface, and you bend the Monaco at right angles, and you run it through that blade, and it slices it off. Don't use that much because I don't do a lot of Monaco. These are indispensable. They're sort of pricey, but for what they are. They're gauge block sets if you're setting up a router or a table saw, or you just want to, you know, something square. Now obviously music wire will do the same thing, an 1/8 and 3/16 and 1/4. But this goes a 3/8 and a half, and they're nice because they're flat. Here's another ceramic stone. I was using the sharp X-Actos. I don't use that much since I've got the other ones. And then the ball drivers and files, more files. And here, scissors. These are more for composites, this scissor. These are good if you can get them from a medical lab, or if you know a doctor or a surgeon. These things have carbide inserts in them, and I've cut the flashing off of bell cranks with these things for years. It's amazing what they'll cut, and they stay sharp. Rotary wheel cutter for cutting fiberglass. I usually cut fiberglass on MDF, or not MDF, but I cut it on UHMW with the rotary cutter. X-Acto blades. It's a big saw. Use these a lot. They're not as good as the Japanese pole saw though. But the Zona saw, it's okay. Let's see what else. Pretty obvious there. Little scrapers or dental tools. Just a miniature crescent wrench. These are good. Nipex. Worth every penny. A little bit more money. I like these because you got a button and you slide it. Once you hit that spot, it stays in that. Doesn't come out of the groove. As you can see, I can do it easily one-handed. Or if it's crescent, I couldn't, but crescent makes a good wrench. Now here's the Japanese pole saw. It's on the handle. This little bag is full of all kinds of sanding fixtures. One-handed here. See if I can open this thing one-handed. I don't know how much time I got on this live stream, but maybe 30 minutes. These are sanders that I use to cut notches for the hinge barrels. Can't even remember what I was doing with that. All the hinge slotting tools. Before I bought the thing from Jim Lee, this is what I was doing. I made a block, boarded out a little bit. This is Jim Lee's version. It's a lifetime forever. Here's one I made years ago. So the depth of this hole here that goes against your thrust washer is determined by the thickness of your nose ring. So if you have a 16th inch nose ring, you probably want 3/32 depth. 1/8 inch, you probably want 3/16. So that's how you compensate for the spinner clearance. Wire benders. This is another Jim Lee tool. This is a circle cutter. You put an X-Acto blade in there. There's one in there. And you actually cut circles with that. I love that tool. So this is a Veritas depth gauge / marking gauge. You can do both with it. You can do two. You know, these things slide out. And they have wheels on them. little wheel is what marks. These are common in woodworking. Don't use them that much in model airplanes, maybe for a depth gauge or something for a bottom hole, or you can use a dial caliper. Metal straight edge, that's just a scrap piece of stainless, I think. Quilting saw, metal saw. This vise comes in handy when you're doing soldering. This is a tool. It's indispensable if you're doing electric. The way it's set up, it does all the different fittings here, or different plugs. So with all these little cutouts in this jig, with the bullet connectors and the different ones, it's probably got it pretty much covered. I'm sure they've come out with different stuff since then. You probably need a different jig maybe, but this little wire bender, this is great for up to 1/8 inch. These are bending jigs I use for horns. It's the same thing as a single, but the way this is set up, let's say that's 2 inches, that way each horn you bend is exactly the same. So I made designated benders. This is scrap out of a machine shop from something. It was a reject, and I just turned it into a block for a bender. These are dowel pins. This was a brazing jig, which I covered in another video, how to make horns. And the homemade handles to the wire benders for these little jigs. This is Jim Lee's here. I think you sandwich some tin stock in there, and it's a bender. So you squeeze it, and then you'd form it to make a bend. That's a neat little tool. Simple, but it's neat. I use a lot of this on layout when I do obviously drawing plans or building. They come in handy. More scissors, a temp, you know, if you're going to do composites. It's nice to know how hot it is. This is a master air screw, little sander. This is great if you're doing the small stuff, peanut scale or small stab. Let's see what else. That's about it, I think. That's the last drawer. Down there is just other stuff I've got stacked down there. Well, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It's just this is all the stuff I like to keep right in front of me in this little roll around chest. So at this point, what you'd probably do is go through there and take a scraper and scrape the edge of this paint. Sometimes C-temp works out good, like that. Break the edge of the masking film. Now when you do metallics, you really can't sand them because it gets into the flake, and it'll show up when you sand metallic. So you got to leave those alone. You just have to scrape it like this, and that peels off the little extra. Now, if it's a solid color, obviously you can wet sand it like a 1500. But it's pretty tight. You could put clear over that. So anyway, that's about it. 35 minutes. Thanks for stopping by and watching. Put some stuff out there when I get it, and Had fun showing you guys this. See you next time.